Tsuyoshi Kohsaka is what you might call a polarizing figure, but only in some weird law of averages type way. By all accounts from those who know him, like friend of the channel Josh Barnett, TK as he's also called is a nice man and a great grappler. No, it's because of how he's remembered respectively by wrestling and mixed martial arts fans separately. In wrestling, he was an amazing part of Fighting Network rings and other shoot-style promotions. If you're someone who only tunes in for MMA videos and isn't a fan of wrestling, I'd actually highly recommend you check out Rings. It alternated between a wrestling and MMA promotion, and it was really fucking sick. But regardless, well respected, very skilled. In MMA, however, the primary thing he's remembered for is his air quotes win over Fyodor Emelianenko, which happened because an elbow, which I believe was illegal, opened up a cut on Fyodor. And the fact was, at the time, Japanese promotions didn't like blood, and that combined with the fact that it was part of a one-night tournament and thus the cut could reopen, meant Kohsaka was awarded very dubious win. It should have been either a no contest or DQ win for Fyodor, but regardless, the last Emperor got his win back, so it is what it is. Beyond that, however, he participated in a wide range of fights in various promotions, from Pride to early UFC to the ring shoots. Being the martial artist he was, he also participated in submission grappling tournaments such as early ADCC and some BJJ tournaments in Asia, as well as Japanese jiu-jitsu tournaments. He got his ass beat in ADCC, but it's really cool that he showed up, honestly. If you've heard early UFC commentary talk about TK, very early MMA viewers were enamored with his use of the butterfly guard. He's one of the earliest examples I could find of its usage in no-holds-barred fighting, although I'm sure there are earlier examples from Vale Tudo or other places I just couldn't find the footage. He came from a Kosen judo background, the same as martial artists like Shinya Aoki, Yuki Nakai, the legend Masahiko Kimura, and even global icon Antonio Inoki. As I understand it, although I know judokas will absolutely correct me in the comments, nerds, just kidding, I love you. Kosen was an earlier version of judo that branched off, focusing more on the ground game and allowing competitors to stay there as long as they wanted, contrasting the ground timer and emphasis on almost purely stand-up grappling seen in contemporary judo, which is why I hate judo. Apparently, Jigoro Kano hated the rule set, which is both really funny, but also makes perfect sense, as the just bleed mentality of Kosen, which held Ippon as the only win condition, which more or less means a pin, a tap out, or one of those big-ass throws, contrasted the academic mind of Kano. Despite being more so associated with the child discipline of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, from what I understand, the concept of the guard does exist somewhat in Judo, sometimes going by the name Do Osae, sorry for my Japanese, meaning trunk hold. From here, it then does make sense to me that the butterfly guard would stem from Kosen Judo, as it's a very aggressive guard designed to prevent pins, flip position, and allow for explosive movement and attacks characteristic of the quote-unquote gentle way. According to my research, the earliest evidence of the technique comes from 70s and 80s judo competition footage, before it was adopted by BJJ. While the grappling stratagems might be primitive from a modern no-gi perspective, I think it's valuable to see how we got to where we are. Without further ado, we're going to look at how TK used the butterfly guard, general bottom game,
Does the power have to do with the size or the strength of the bottom?
and leg locks in his fights, and see what we can learn from his application. I'm only looking at his fights with significant guard action, since he had roughly 2 billion bouts, so some notable ones might be omitted. We're going to track what he does, whether it works, and how he evolves over time. As a closing note for the introduction, his guard is often called the TK guard, and it's a matter of debate whether that refers to the butterfly guard, half guard, or something else. So for now, we'll just imagine it means the entire system as a whole. We first enter our study in the 1995 Lumax Cup. You may be understandably asking what the hell that is, because honestly, before a friend of the channel, Control, made me aware of it, I had no idea either. It was a 1995 Japanese jiu-jitsu tournament that basically resembled MMA in a gi, or combat sambo sans headgear, with striking and grappling allowed, and the only sort of strange elements being the boxing or kickboxing style knockdowns and ring outs, as there was no barrier separating the tatami mats from the outside. TK actually wins his round 1 matchup via strikes, only using wrestling rides and rear naked choke attempts during the fight. The first time he employs his grappling from the guard is in round 2 versus Suzumu Yamazaki. Kohsaka begins this one confidently wrong with a judo throw, which he does honestly a lot, which only accomplishes landing himself on bottom, albeit with a good grip on Yamazaki's arm. He lands pretty much in perfect armbar position, and the existence of gi grips adds to the threat. As his opponent methodically tries to get his arm out, TK begins transitioning to half guard. Something that he does a lot is transition between butterfly and half guard at the bottom, locking up a tight half guard when he needs to buy time, and then employing the butterfly when it's time to sweep. By doing so, he minimizes the risk of someone beating his butterfly hooks with simple hip pressure. Once in the half guard, he contemplates putting in a butterfly hook before he rolls for a heel hook, a surprisingly modern attack given how skewed the modern no-gi scene is to half guard based leg attacks, cough cough, Danaher Death Squad, Craig Jones, cough cough. Yamazaki taps, and that's all that's needed. Versus Egan Inoue. Now in the finals, TK fights Racquetball King Egan Inoue, the less famous brother of Ensign, not in the Yakuza, #Yakuza Inoue. He first ends up on bottom after a knee lever sweep by Inoue, and mounted resorts to rolling for a leg via his famous TK scissor sweep, and a pretty impressive display of flexibility. A scissor or flower sweep, as it's also known, is typically performed from full guard, but he's so flexible and his neck so strong, he can do this from the bottom of mount by rolling himself backwards and bridging onto his neck. He doesn't finish anything, but stands up from the leg entanglement and even lands a punch, thoroughly mixing the martial arts. Novel concept, I know. Inoue takes him down back to half guard and passes before entering a very high mount to hunt for the armbar. Second verse, same as the first, he rolls for the heel hook, which very clearly panics Inoue this time, as he gets closer to scoring with it. He takes top position easily and then stacks Inoue for a pass. Once in side control, he rolls for an armbar and doesn't get it, gets mounted, and wait for it, sweeps with his roll. What's evident to me here is that he's not even the greatest bottom player in the world, but he's also not afraid of ending up there. So many early Japanese MMA guys were either from an amateur wrestling, catch, or judo, all of which have pins as a win condition. Because of that, they tended to get very skittish when ending up on bottom, leading to bouts full of stalling or desperate get-ups. TK gives no fucks about where he ends up, and the calmness seen in his fights allows him to pull off completely bullshit-looking counters. Very Sakuraba-esque. He seemingly has complete peace of mind no matter what position, and it's very fun to watch. While rolling for an armbar in round 2, he once again ends up on bottom, and characteristically shows no fear, looking for an armbar and ending up in bottom north-south before calmly moving back towards side control. Inoue tries an armbar, TK counters, and ends up on top for the victory by decision. I haven't really been commenting on his work from the top of guard and mouth, purely because of how fundamentally sound it is. He employs wrestling rides when possible for the back, and stacks for simple guard passes at his opponent's guard. That combined with his dynamic counters off his back lead to really smooth performances. Versus Kimmo Leapalo. A few years later, and we're in a promotion all viewers will be familiar with, the very early UFC, but don't worry, Bruce Buffer is here and looking handsome as always. The fight starts with a bang as TK fearlessly shoots on Kimmo, and as the big man sprawls, TK rolls backwards like a freak, looking for a leg entry before facing the danger and deciding to play full guard. Kimmo successfully passes to half while standing before rolling for a leg lock. Despite the announcers yelling, "It's deep!" Yes, it's really always been this bad. Kohsaka stands up before being returned to the same half-guard position by Kimmo. We return here for a while as Kohsaka is either taking a breather or minimizing danger while he plans his next move, but he opens his guard to present threats to both the arm and leg of Kimmo before closing it again. He does the same thing, but gets the stand-up from the leg lock threat. Kimmo takes him down again, passes the half, and ends up in mount before, guess what? Kohsaka TK scissors backwards and uses the ass-to-ass leg entanglement to stand up. At the risk of getting repetitive, these attacks are really impressive to me, not just because of their effectiveness, but who they're against. Kimmo had only lost to Shamrock the Lesser and Hoist Gracie at this point, and at times looked like the fucking Terminator. Fighting Kimmo the same way he fought guys in the Lumax Cup takes balls, but because he's level-headed and believes in this grappling system, it's working at least defensively. TK boxes up a much-depleted Kimmo for the rest of the round, somehow turning laying on his back into a genius work of cardio attritional grappling because of what a bad gas tank Kimmo actually has. In the overtime round, he's taken down with the last of Leapaldo's strength, who goes for a desperation armbar, but that's all he has, and TK wins the decision. While not sexy, this performance is a proof of concept that the same system he employed in silly gi MMA tournaments can work in full no-holds-barred combat. Returning to the cage some months later versus Pete Williams at the not at all confusingly titled UFC Brazil or UFC 17.5, TK spends 4 minutes on top before pulling the ghillie. He plays half guard for a while, and interestingly, Williams elects to stand up, something you might see in full guard but rarely half. Later, he ends up on bottom after failing a judo throw and actually gets what I assume is a knee lever or John Wayne sweep. But the referee is standing right in front of the fucking camera, so we're just going to have to picture what it fully looks like. Goddamn you, Big John, and your blockhead. Visual obstruction aside, this is a sweep commonly used today and championed by figures ranging from the grappling genius and Long Island serial killer John Danaher, as well as analyst Jack Slack, whose format I very lovingly borrowed for this video. TK ends up on bottom another time in round 3, actually trying to score with the Kimura from behind just before the fight ends. The guard sequences are very brief, but once again proof of a relative modernity of TK's game, sweeping instead of just throwing up Hail Mary submissions. In the words of Bruce Buffer, it's time, specifically to engage the TK guard. TK finds himself against none other than probably the best or second best heavyweight in the world at the time, Big Nog, as he pits his judo against the BJJ ace. Minotauro and Kohsaka trade some of the world's worst takedown attempts, until Big Thani Nogtano finally hits a decent-looking double leg, landing in the guard of TK. Kohsaka is seated as the takedown is completed, and thus puts his butterfly hooks in immediately. He runs into one of the problems with butterfly guard, however, being the instability if your opponent elects to go to the side and pass with hip pressure, which Nicky Rod actually does a lot in modern grappling. And thus Minotauro passes a side control and then mounts exactly as you're supposed to. Unfortunately for him, he hasn't really pinned TK, who initiates wrestling scrambles repeatedly to shift position. After being stood back up, Nogueira shoots once again. The Brazilian being clearly stronger, TK has a lot of trouble sprawling, as he cannot break the grip. Instead, he employs an incredibly fucking cool move, grabbing a grip akin to Minoru Suzuki's pro wrestling finisher, the Got-style pile driver, and using it to flip Minotauro to his back, in a motion very similar to a butterfly sweep. A sprawl to a cradle, often a crossface cradle, is a risky but effective move in amateur wrestling, but this is the first time I've seen someone pull it straight back rather to the side, as an amateur wrestler would go slightly sideways so that they don't accidentally pin themselves in most cases. Nog stays doggedly on the legs, and TK ends up in half guard. In an evolution from his previous fights, he plays more aggressively, almost immediately going for a sweep, attacking that same knee lever sweep, and while failing, stops his guard from being passed before moving Nog with a butterfly sweep, momentarily regaining full guard before going back to half. He does the same thing again and uses it to roll Big Nog off of him, attacking the same Gotch-style pile sweep as we'll call it, but failing. This is a whole lot of work to keep ending up in bottom half, but it's important to note that this is fucking Big Nog, a man whose only loss at this point is to Dan fucking Henderson, and wouldn't lose for another 4 years before meeting Fyodor in Pride. He gets the stand up eventually after attacking a guillotine against the ropes, and even spends some time at the end of round 1 on top of Nog in full guard. TK survives being mounted by Big Nog in the second by rolling for the legs, actually sweeping him and landing some solid ground and pound before Nog in turn sweeps him back with a beautiful pendulum sweep. TK simply bucks him off in a tremendous display of strength and spends the rest of the fight on top before trying another Gotch pile driver thingy in the closing seconds. It's declared a draw, but he fucking earned it. This vision of Minotauro would go on to submit Hendo, Bob Sapp, and Mark Coleman, but somehow this weird judo guy with at least a 30-pound weight disadvantage has equaled him. It's magnificent work by TK. Versus Mikhail Ilyukin. Against one of Volkan's proteges in Ilyukin, TK ends up mounted before employing his trademark magic bullshit, bringing his legs up in front of Ilyukin for the mount for the escape. The same thing happens again with another Gotch style thrown in for good measure. I think it's evident that after the Big Nog fight, he realized that this weird set of tactics was incredibly effective even at the highest level, and thus decided to focus efforts there in order to be the most efficient. The Russian later chins him before shooting the double, and so in order to buy time, Kohsaka puts in butterfly hooks while teasing a Kimura without locking it in. He can't pull it off and ends in side control before regaining half guard. From here he does a sweep I can't even describe, basically just back rolling himself onto a wrestling base, whilst assuming a position that vaguely resembles a deep half. If there are words for it, please comment below, because this shit is cool. Back on the feet, he knocks out Mikhail because that's our fucking boy. Albeit in a losing effort via majority decision, which still means it was a close fight, here we see another evolution by TK, him playing knee shield, perhaps the most in vogue guard variation of modern day, and one I love to use personally in order to set up octopus guard and other attacks. Hanato Sobral, as the luta livre boy he is, almost immediately attempts to cradle him, a response to the knee shielding guard I absolutely love, and general half guard ethos espoused by Neil Melanson in the modern day. The two grip fight, and just as it's about to get interesting, the bout is unfortunately stood up. Thankfully, we end up back here shortly with TK aggressively pursuing sweeps from the knee shield, before turning in and looking for a Kimura. It's really interesting to look at him building posture, as if he could clear the left arm of Sobral instead of trying a Kimura, he could have achieved octopus guard. He puts the knee shield back in and uses a grip akin to the setup for an arm drag to stand up, as the push and pull of the grip in his knees create enough space for him to suck out his hips and get to his knees. The rest of the fight plays out like this, with TK consistently able to maintain a knee shield, but not able to sweep or submit from it. It's very innovative of him to attempt it, but Sobral's luta livre pressure means that he's able to beat a lot of the threats, and TK's shiny new toy is not yet fleshed out enough to win. Regardless, we are watching a man speedrun the history of no-gi grappling for shits and giggles, and it's amazing. Tsuyoshi Kohsaka is not a perfect fighter, but one endlessly interesting the more you look at him. I think there's a lot to learn from his work as we track someone basically telegraphing the coming meta of no-gi grappling in the 21st century. This was never going to be as meaty of a video as my other analyses of Geary and RDR, since I'm not looking at his whole grappling system, just what he does from his back. Hence, the Filthy Casuals Guide format. If you watch his fights in full, you'll actually see he spends most of the time on top, and uses his bottom game first and foremost to get him at least back to his wrestling base, if not sweeping the top outright. As someone who will never feel fully comfortable off their back for extended periods of time, I find there's a lot to learn for even how far back into MMA we're going. TK's stratagem, sans the TK scissors, because no way in hell am I pulling that off in a roll, are really amazing. His approach might be unorthodox to say the least, but in the words of Marcelo Garcia, don't let what's correct get in the way of what works. I make these studies first and foremost for my own enjoyment, and you can bet yourself that I'm trying that Gott-style pile driver from front headlock next time I end up there. If you'd like to see a particular grappler analyzed, please comment below. I have a short list, but I may or may not get to it. Until next time, I'll see you. More wrestling content on the way.